Hello, everyone. Thank you for your participating in the Global Digicon Salon. Today, we would like to ask Bill Fernandez son to share his memories of Steve Jobs. As you know, it's been 9 years since Steve Jobs died on October 5th, 2011, and this year is the 10th anniversary. Now that the world is being hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, what would he think and do if Steve Jobs is alive? Let's think about that together. At first, we would like to offer a silent prayer for him. Please remember him of the past day. Then, quietly focus on your breathing, because that is the secret of them he loved. Look at the picture in 1984. Jobs put his Macintosh on the correct Zazen poster, lotus position. Jobs, Zen, and Macintosh. These three were one. So please, let's do silent prayer for 1 minute. 1分間の黙祷をお願いします。Thank you for your cooperation. In 2011, NHK broadcast a program called Steve Jobs, the Man Who Changed the World. Why was Jobs able to change the world? This is today's main theme. Hi, Bill-san. Please come in. Hi. Thank you.
Hello there.
Thank you.
I understand it's morning in Japan, so minasan ohayou gozaimasu.
Thank you for coming in the Global Digicon Salon. At first, I would like to brief introduce you. Bill Fernandez-san introduced Wozniak to Jobs and joined Apple as the first full-time employee, contributed to the development of Apple I, Apple II, Macintosh, etc. And Bill-san made the chance Jobs discovered the elegance of Japanese culture and applied it to Apple products. I will ask you about this important theme in the DG later.
So, this is the Shinhanga by Hasui Kawase that was his wedding gift, a very thoughtful gift. Because I also love Shinhanga.
中高生の時、フェルナンデスさんの家でよく過ごしていたというジョブズ氏。その時のことを母親はよく覚えていました。
He and his friends would go in there and experiment with their electronics.
日本美術を学んだ母親の影響で何枚もの新版画で埋め尽くされていた部屋。この環境がその後のジョブズ氏に影響を与えたといいます。
He liked that a lot. It became very attractive to him. You could see his love of simplicity and elegance throughout his life, like in the products that he developed at Apple.
This is part of NHK News 49. Mr. Jobs, the origin of manufacturing. At first, please tell us about the episodes of you and Jobs in Cupertino Junior High School. It's long, Cupertino Junior High School, okay?
Okay.
Right.
Well, we met in junior high school, and we were both kind of shy, both intellectual. neither of us wanted to play the social games we needed to be accepted into any of the groups that young people organize themselves into. So we gravitated towards each other and we became best friends.
Yes. Oh, Don-san, thank you. I'm now at
Hello, Daniel.
I'm now interviewing Bill-san, and please join later in the panel discussion. That's okay. Please turn off your video and mic. Oh, please. Okay. 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 Yes. Okay. And do you know Jobs when he was in Montaloma Elementary School? And do you know why he transferred from Christendom Middle School to Cupertino Middle School?
No, that was before I met him.
Okay. Jobs was a problem child in Montaloma Elementary School, but he met teacher, Imogen Terry Hill. He turned out to be excellent enough to skip 2 grades. Jobs skipped 1 grade and entered Crittenden Middle School, but he refused to go to school due to bullying. So Jobs transferred to Cupertino Middle School and met you. Okay?
Yes.
And
it's very common in school for young kids in America that if you're very smart, school is very boring.
Yeah.
And it's also true that if you're very smart, the other kids will bully you. They will beat you up.
Yeah.
So he probably suffered from both of those things.
I agree with you. Okay. Then in 1967, the family moved to 2066 Chris Drive, Los Altos for Jobs, a child refusal child. That house where Jobs and you assembled the Apple I in the garage. Please comment about this.
Well, I understand that his parents moved into that city so that he could attend the school where I met him. That's what I've heard. And we became friends and we went over to each other's houses and we would play in each other's backyards and we would eventually do electronics projects in each other's garages. And then when Jobs and Woz were starting Apple, Jobs' father and mother let him use part of their garage for their little company. And it used to be that I would ride my bicycle over to his house to play. But now, after they hired me, I drove my little car over to their house to go to work.
Interesting. Okay. And this point is that Jobs was school refusal, problem child, but genius child depending on the teacher. That's the point. Next, in the summer of 1971, you introduced your childhood friend Wozniak to Jobs, a classmate at Homestead High School. Please tell us about the situation at that time. And Wozniak himself described Jobs' first impression like this.
Oh, my first memory was I had designed a computer and was building it in a garage down the street with a friend. And he said, you have to meet this other guy. He went to our high school and his name is Steve Jobs. And he understands digital electronics. And he also plays pranks at the high school, which I was famous for. So Steve came over and we met on the sidewalk, as I remember. And we just started asking each other, what did you do? What pranks did you do? And I would tell which ones I did. And then he, what have you done with electronics? And he built this, and I've designed all these computers. And we just hit it off. And then we merged into other topics that young people are into.
Hi. Please, your comments.
Well, I grew up in a small neighborhood where the children were always out in the street playing, and I lived across the street from the Wozniak family. And so I knew Steve Wozniak for many years, but he was 4 years older than me, and he graduated from high school the year before Jobs and I entered the high school. So we never did anything together until my first year of high school when we started doing electronics projects. In the video, he said that he built a computer with a friend in his garage. Well, that was me. The computer he designed, but we built it in my garage one summer. You may have heard in Apple history of the cream soda computer. That was the name that was given to it by a writer who was writing the history of Apple. He called it the cream soda computer because we drank a lot of cream soda during that summer. And so I was doing electronics projects with Woz, and separately I was doing electronics projects with Jobs. And I thought that they would like to meet each other because they were both friends of mine and both interested in the same subject. So one day when Jobs came over to visit, I took him across the street and I saw Woz washing his car out in front of the Wozniak family house, and I introduced them to each other on the sidewalk.
Very interesting. And Jobs belonged to an electric work club in high school. He called the president of Hewlett Packard to get parts and work part-time. What was it like?
Well, we had a great electronics program. We had an electronics lab as one of the classrooms, and we had a great electronics teacher. That picture that you showed had the teacher, John McCullum, on the left. And one of the things he did was he got a number of companies to hire some of his students, well, not hire, but to bring them on as in work-study program so that they could do some work at these different companies and learn from being in the real industry. I went to NASA, and Steve Jobs went to Hewlett Packard.
Well, very interesting. On this picture, you don't here?
No, I am not in that.
Okay. And next. In 1971, Jobs and Woz, his first collaboration to produce the telephone free of charge device, Blue Box. They made a prank call to the Pope and sold it to students, etc. And how do you think about this?
Well, Steve Wozniak read an article in Esquire magazine that described how if you made the right tones into your telephone, that you could pretend to be a telephone operator and you could control the route of a telephone call using long distance phone lines around the world. And it turned out that the technical information was all freely available in technical books, and Woz got a copy and read all the technical information. And he designed this little box in his hand with buttons you could push, and he had a little speaker that you could put up to your phone, and it would make the correct tones. And then you could look up in the directory which tones you needed to make to connect different long distance lines. And there was a way to use that to make free long distance phone calls, which was very interesting because in those days, long distance phone calls were very expensive. Calling the other side of the country might cost $1 per minute, or to call another country might cost $10 or $20 a minute. So being able to do that for free was kind of interesting.
Very interesting.
Once he had this created, Jobs said, you know, we could build some of these and sell them to other people. We could sell them for a couple $100s a piece and make some money. So that was their first business venture together.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Well, this Blue Box now on display in the Computer History Museum. You know. Okay. And in 1975, Jobs and Woz premiered the Apple I as the homebrew computer club. Jobs decided to set up a company after receiving an order for 50 units from Byte Shop. April 1st, 1976, Jobs, Woz, and Ron Wayne found Apple Computer Company. How did you and Daniel Kotoke-san help assemble the Apple I in the Jobs garage?
Well, Daniel and I did not overlap very much. I think for the first 50 boards, Jobs bought all the parts, and they had to be separated out into little kits, one for each board. And my understanding is that he hired Daniel Kotke and his sister, Patty Jobs, to separate out all the parts into little kits. And the kits would be sent with the boards to a woman who had set up a company and hired housewives to assemble the Apple I's on their kitchen tables and solder them together. Daniel may be able to correct me if I made any mistakes about that. So that was how the first batch of 50 boards was built. And then after that, they incorporated the company, and they built another batch that they had built a different way. And after incorporating, they needed to hire permanent employees. So I was the first one they hired as a full-time permanent employee. And I went to work in the garage with Jobs. And I'd go out and I'd pick up parts, and I would test boards, and I would build test fixtures and so forth, and any kind of technical assistance they needed while Jobs was trying to be an entrepreneur and get the company running.
Right. And January 3rd, 1977, Jobs, Woz, and the investor Mike Merkler found Apple Computer Inc. You joined as the first full-time employee. How did you contribute to Apple II?
Well, I think they incorporated in January of 1977, and they hired me in February of 1977. And at that time, the Apple II did not exist. Woz was designing various things. I think after I was hired, he did the cassette interface board and some other things, and then was working on the Apple II. Jobs was trying to get a case designed for it so that it could be attractive and you could just buy it pre-assembled. And I didn't have anything to do with designing that. I continued to do a lot of technical tasks to assist in the engineering and the development and the running of the company. Yeah.
And you write circuit, don't you?
I liked circuits. Yes.
Yes. You did write the circuit of Apple II, circuit map.
Well, you may be confusing something. Steve Wozniak, when he designed circuitry, like you see that page on the left, he used a kind of shorthand to represent the design. But other people, like technicians who had to troubleshoot it or repair it, or people who had to lay out the printed circuit board to get all the traces connecting the right parts and so forth, they needed what's called a schematic. And a schematic shows all the parts and all the wires and the pins that they connect to and so forth. So I had to take Woz's little shorthand diagrams and I had to expand that out into a full schematic, showing all the parts and all the wires that connected them, so that everyone else could understand it and do their work. Yeah.
I think it's very important work.
Oh, it was, because no one else could do what they needed without the schematic. But so, yeah.
Thank you. And Wozniak talks about Jobs' genius. This is an excellent aspect of Jobs. How do you think about this?
Well,
I was such a genius in computer design that it just overshadowed anything he would do in the technical realm. He was very fast thinking. He had an idea. He wanted to go here. He wanted to go there. He wanted to go there. he was almost driven with a lot of anxiety and hyperemotion, and he had great thoughts and he had great thinking. And when we first started Apple, he would often pose very good questions. Why isn't a company organized this way? Why doesn't a certain person do a certain job rather than another person do it? And he was almost always, you couldn't contradict him. He also had this drive to have a role at first. Eventually it would become like power, control, but a role of just having input into every major department and development in the company. I think he's going to be remembered for the categories of products that he took the world towards, the quality of the products that came out of Apple and his other companies, and also that he was an incredible business leader that built a huge company by basically keeping moving in good, solid, well-managed directions.
Hi. How about his comments?
Well, Woz was the engineer and Jobs was the entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Woz was the person with the technical expertise to design a unique and wonderful piece of electronics. And Jobs was the person who said, we can make a product that people will love, and I want to do that. And so he had a lot of hustle. When he started, hustle means that you're always working, always trying to do the next thing, that you're always in motion. And when they started, Jobs didn't know how to run a company. He didn't know how to do shipping or receiving or assembly or testing or anything that you needed to make, or do marketing and so forth. But he said, okay, I need this. I need to learn how to do it. I need to find a person who can do it. So he was always running, trying to put all the pieces together to make a business that would be able to create and sell the electronic product that was designed.
Yeah, very interesting. Entrepreneur should be so. Okay.
Yeah.
And he said Jobs always respected him and treated him kindly, but it was different for you and Daniel Kotoke-san. He treated you badly in early Apple. It was his negative perspective.
For me, he always respected me. And even in later years, even if I didn't have a very good answer, he didn't ever treat me like, oh, I was dumb or I didn't know that answer. He was very respectful, very nice and polite to me. So I never hung around enough to see, what some people call, brash behavior or whatever.
How do you think about this?
Well, Woz and Jobs are two of my oldest and best friends.
Yeah.
And I always had a great relationship with each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs was never mean to me or negative to me.
Mm-hmm.
In the early people that they hired, many of them did not get stock in the company. So many of them, when the company went public, did not become wealthy. And there are people who think that that was unfair to the early people. So I didn't get any of that early stock, but I never felt that it was mean. And he was never nasty to me. He was always very nice to me. We always worked very well together.
I see. I'm sorry. Okay.
Woz and Jobs hired me because I was the best they knew for what they needed at that time. A general purpose technical assistant. And Woz has said that, Bill was the best we knew at this specific thing that we need, okay? And they both respected me highly for what I could do and for the person that I was, the person that I am as a friend, yeah?
Okay. And the next question is, in 1979, you quit Apple, came to Japan, and stayed in Sapporo for 2 years. What kind of activities were you doing in Japan?
Basically, I had been studying the martial art of Aikido for many years.
Oh, yeah.
And I decided I wanted to go to Japan and study Aikido. So I did that, and I got my my Shodan, my first degree black belt, while I was there, and learned how to speak Japanese a little bit, and learned a lot about Japanese culture and made friends and so forth. And then I came back to America, and a few years later, got my second degree black belt in Aikido.
Okay. And all these pictures in Japan or not?
No, the one on the left,
Mhm.
I was on TV in the I think in Osaka, Ken,
Oh.
maybe briefly singing a song. I was helping out the Baha'i faith, my religion, and I was making little concerts in kisaten, in
Oh.
coffee shops. And then the one in the middle is the backyard at my house where I grew up.
Oh, really?
And the one on the right was my apato, my apartment in Sapporo-shi.
Yeah. I see. The middle picture is you in your house. I feel
Yes.
this look like a Japanese. I see. Okay. And you returned to Apple in 1981 and worked for Apple until 1994. And you contributed to the UI development of classic Mac OS, QuickTime, and HyperCard. What was it like?
Well, over those years, the environment changed a lot. When I went back to work at Apple, I worked for the Macintosh group. I was maybe the 15th person, 15 person in the Macintosh group. We were a small group working in a little office behind a gas station away from the rest of Apple, like a little pirate band doing something away from the rest of Apple. And then later we moved into a regular Apple building on the Apple campus, and the Macintosh group got bigger. We had hundreds of people. We had marketing and everything. I was sent to Japan to work with Sony on the external disk drive, and it all became very official. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah. So it changed. Yeah.
And you were in the sense that you are a designer, UX designer, don't you?
That changed over time. I was a member of technical staff, kind of an engineer when I went back. Eventually became an electronic engineer. And then I had a chance to work on HyperCard. HyperCard was designed by a friend of mine, Bill Atkinson, and he liked my ideas. So he got Apple to loan me to him to do user interface design for HyperCard. And then after that, I transferred into the user interface department. And then as part of an official user interface designer, I worked on the QuickTime project, which is how we brought video and sound into computers. And it was one of the precursors to being able to make Zoom conferences or the World Wide Web, because you couldn't have sound and video until we added it with QuickTime. And then now we call what I do user experience instead of user interface. So
yes, okay. Okay. The summary of this part: fast thinking genius, anxiety person, left Apple II personal computer revolution unfinished. One, Apple II, open architecture. Open architecture isn't, I think, is not old. Today's theme, but Apple II was CUI, character user interface. This is old. The next classic Mac, closed architecture, GUI, graphical user interface is super, but single task. 12 years later, Miraculous came back. And he said, think different. Then we shaped the recovery of Apple on the verge of bankruptcy. Then he became the man who changed the world. Why was Jobs able to change the world? The excellence of Japanese culture and Apple is one of the key.
iPod や iPhone といった革新的な製品を次々に世に送り出してきたアップルの共同創設者スティーブ・ジョブズ氏。 来年で亡くなって10年になります。そのジョブズ氏が熱心に買い集めていたのが新版画と呼ばれる日本の美術品です。そのリストを NHK に入手しました。
ジョブズ氏のものづくりに日本の美術との深い関わりがあったことが見えてきました。Hello, I am Macintosh. マッキントッシュコンピューター、iMac、そして携帯音楽プレーヤーの iPod、斬新なアイディアとデザインで IT 業界に革命を起こしたスティーブ・ジョブズ氏。2007年に発売された iPhone は小さな端末一つで誰でも簡単に世界中の情報にアクセスできる世界を実現させました。20年前、NHK の番組に出演した際、自らが開発した製品で世界をどう変えていきたいのか、そのビジョンを語っていました。
We see at Apple, one of the things we've always felt is that we want to stand at the intersection of technology and humanities. Can we help you express yourself in richer ways, in your music, in your movies, in your photography, and these kinds of things that people want to do?
Jobs said, we understand the intersection of technology and humanity. Can you help you express yourself in richer way? In your music, in your movies, in your photography, those things people want to do. How do you think about this? Your comment, please.
Well, Apple has always been about empowering people to do what was important to them, empowering them using electronic products. So, for example, we weren't making medicines, and we weren't making new hybrid flowers or grains for growing food, but we were making electronic products. But always electronic products that people would love and would empower them to do what they wanted, which could be making beautiful pictures or beautiful music or just playing music, you know?
Yeah. So it's, well, excellent. Yeah. The next video.
そのジョブズ氏が世界に躍り出るきっかけになったのが、1984年に発表した新製品、マッキントッシュ。
I'm Steve Jobs from Apple Computer. We're very glad to be here tonight.
この社運をかけた大事な場面、モニターに映し出されたのが、美しい髪を櫛で溶かす官能的な女性の絵。これは、ジョブズ氏自身が日本で購入した新版画でした。新版画とは、江戸時代の浮世絵の技術を使って大正から昭和にかけて制作された版画で、大胆な構図と近代的な色使いが特徴となっています。なぜジョブズ氏は大事な発表の場で新版画を示したのか。実は発表会の前の年、ジョブズ氏は東京銀座にある老舗の画廊を訪れていました。この時接客した松岡春夫さんです。まだ若いジョブズはヨレヨレの T シャツにジーンズ姿だったといいます。
当時まだカラー印刷が非常に高いアップルのマークが入ったカラー名刺を出されたので、ちょっとびっくりした覚えがあります。
この時、ジョブズ氏は2点の新版画を購入しました。一つは桜の背景に富士山が描かれた作品。もう一つは美人画の朝女神。起きたての女性の生めかしさがよく描かれている作品です。こちらは当時の価格で70万円と高額なものでした。松岡さんはジョブズ氏の絵の選び方に目を見張ったといいます。
画集が頭に入って、好みもきちんと整理されているんじゃないかと思うほど、感性が鋭く素早く決定されるかと思うと、その辺はびっくりしました。
ジョブズ氏が生涯にわたって新版画を大切にしていたことを物語る一枚の写真があります。自伝に掲載された自宅でくつろぐジョブズ氏の写真。2004年に撮影されたものですが、よく見ると、部屋の壁にかけられていたのは、松岡さんから初めて購入した朝女神でした。ジョブズ氏がなぜ新版画にのめり込んでいったのか、取材を進めると、原点ともいえる新たな事実が見えてきました。ビル・フェルナンデスさんです。ジョブズ氏とは10代からの親友でした。
So, this is the Shinhanga by Hasui Kawase that was his wedding gift, very thoughtful gift. Because I also love Shinhanga.
中高生の時、フェルナンデスさんの家でよく過ごしていたというジョブズ氏。その時のことを母親はよく覚えていました。
He and his friend would go in there and experiment with their electronics.
日本美術を学んだ母親の影響で何枚もの新版画で埋め尽くされていた部屋。この環境がその後のジョブズ氏に影響を与えたといいます。
He liked that a lot. It became very attractive to him. You could see his love of simplicity and elegance throughout his life, like in the products that, he developed at Apple.
スティーブはですね、余計なものを全部省いていってシンプルにするっていうところがすごく求めていたところなんですね。新版画でも極力突き詰めていってシンプルに表現することによって本質が見えてくるところ、そこに多分共通点を見出したんではないかなと思いますね。
余計なものを見極めて削ぎ落とすことで本質を見つける。何か私たちもさまざまな課題に立ち向かうときに参考になるアプローチ方法だと改めて感じます。
今このコロナ禍でスティーブ・ジョブズが健在だったらどんな言葉で何を語るのか聞いてみたかったなと。
So, the point is aesthetics to scrape off unnecessary things. Aesthetics to scrape off the unnecessary things. That's the point, I think. That you said, simple and elegance. And you have many collections of Shinhanga. Please introduce your Shinhanga, please.
Okay. I'll show you 4 examples.
Oh.
Here is one that Steve Jobs saw hanging on the wall in our house, because I have a copy and my mom has a copy. And here is another of my favorites. Yeah, let's see here. And I'll show you 2 more. Yeah. And I like this one because it shows the rain using little strips of mica that have been vertically made striations that glisten in the light, yeah, to show it raining. So anyways, those are examples of some of the kinds of Shinhanga that Steve saw when he came to my house. And Hayashi-san, do you care to turn on your video?
Okay. Please turn on Hayashi-san.
Yeah.
Okay, so look at Hayashi-san's house, and look at the garden and the and so forth. The wood, the light, the natural setting, and so forth. I'll stop talking. So you say something, Hayashi-san, so everyone's screen will update.
So I'm actually joining you from Kida-san's house. Kida-san lives in Machiya in Kyoto. A beautiful Machiya, which is very traditional setting. You can see the tokonoma.
So thank you, the tokonoma. That's the kind of environment that my mother tried to recreate as much as she could using American suburban furniture in an American suburban house. She tried to create that feeling, that spirit, and then hung the Shinhanga on the walls. And you saw in the video the picture of my mother sitting on the couch with the natural wood wall behind her and the shinhanga in the middle. So when Steve Jobs came to our house, he saw a very different environment than the kind of house and the decor that you would normally see in a suburban house in America. And so that had a great influence on him, shaping his sense of aesthetics. Now, over the years, he had many additional influences that developed his sense of aesthetics. But I kind of think that his love for simplicity and elegance started in my house. I think so. Thank you, Hayashi-san.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
So, in article, your grandfather was a researcher of Japanese shinhanga. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, he's the person who, I think I have a photo of him here. He's the person who collected all the shinhanga that eventually was inherited by my mother and that we hung in the house. So here's the person who was the source of all the shinhanga that was in our house and that Steve Jobs was exposed to early on. Yeah, that's my grandfather.
Your grandfather, your mother and your father graduated from Stanford University.
Yes.
So I was surprised that the west coast of the United States, there are so many researchers of Japan or Japanese culture. That's right?
Yes.
And your mother collector of shinhanga. Okay, I see.
Yes.
So next. Well, shinhanga, Japanese culture, simplicity and elegance. I think which produce tremendous power and produce tremendous economic value. Jobs found it and evidenced it. I think so. How do you think about this?
Well, what we just saw was part of what shaped the nature of the products that Apple produced. The iPod, the iPad, the iPhone, the Apple II, and so forth, the Macintosh, where simplicity, elegance, beauty, something that you wanted to use, something that you wanted to be part of your environment, were all things that we put into our products that many other companies didn't. Other companies were interested in technology. We have the fastest or the most powerful or the most RAM or the most something. And the products were very technical and very industrial, if you will, and did not have like the friendliness and the sense of beauty and elegance that makes you happy to handle it and to see it and so forth. It would impress you with how technologically powerful it is, but not necessarily in how lovely it was and how much you wanted it to be part of your life, how much you wanted to interact with it.
So it's attractive of the Apple products, and which make big money. Don't think so?
Well, ultimately, yes. Ultimately, we did a good job, and people liked it.
That's nice. Okay.
You know. Now you notice that you know, all the businesses bought Microsoft products and Microsoft servers and so forth. Okay, all the individuals bought Apple products like iPods and iPhones and Macintoshes.
Yes. So attractiveness is the key point of the Apple products. I think so. So then I'd like to ask you all audiences. On the other hand, we Japanese haven't cherished Japanese culture. Rather, we Japanese have destroyed Japanese culture, haven't we? Then we Japanese continue to decline economically and culturally. Don't you think so? Then last theme, the main theme. Why was Jobs able to change the world? And I think this is related to Japanese culture. What do Jobs think and do if he is alive now? Let's think about it. I think Jobs left a hint for us. He repeated it in 2 keynotes at the end of his life. The intersection of technology and liberal arts. He said that it's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the results that make our hearts sing.
So I've said this before, I thought it was worth repeating. It's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. That it's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the result that makes our hearts sing. And nowhere is that more true than in these post-PC devices. And a lot of folks in this tablet market are rushing in and they're looking at this as the next PC. The hardware and the software are done by different companies, and they're talking about speeds and feeds just like they did with PCs. And our experience in every bone in our body says that that is not the right approach to this. That these are post-PC devices that need to be even easier to use than a PC, that need to be even more intuitive than a PC, and where the software and the hardware and the applications need to intertwine in an even more seamless way than they do on a PC. And we think we're on the right track with this. We think we have the right architecture, not just in silicon, but in the organization to build these kinds of products. And so I think we stand a pretty good chance of being pretty competitive in this market. And I hope that what you've seen today gives you a good feel for that. Now, I'd like to take just a minute at the end. I'd like to ask all the people that worked on iPad 2, from engineering to ops to marketing to finance, from Apple, if you guys could just stand up so we could give you a round of applause. And as always, I'd also like to thank everyone's families, because they support us, let us do what we love to do. So thank you very much to our extended families out there who make it possible for us to work our tails off making these great products for you. So thanks for coming this morning. We've got a great hands-on area, and I'd really encourage you, go get your hands on one of these things. You won't believe it. Thank you very much.
I think this is very impressive stage. Please give me your comments on this stage.
Well, it's much like I said. In that video, he talks about PCs and after PCs. He says the people who develop PCs are trying to build better PCs, more powerful PCs, and put them into little rectangular blocks like tablets and things, but they're still PCs. Whereas Apple is all about building things that empower people to do what they want, to make their life better, to become part of their life, something that enhances your life. Products with soul, for example. Okay, So you have to go beyond the thinking that, well, a PC lets me file things, so let me build a better filer, a faster filer, more storage. Okay, but what's after that? What's after that is playing music or sharing photos or, you know, other things that you can actually use in your life to make your life better.
Yes.
I mean, why does everyone wear a watch?
Yeah.
You know, when you leave your home or your office, you leave your computer on your desk.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you take with you? You take your belt, your shoes, and your watch, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you always wear your watch? Why don't you leave it behind? Because it's part of your life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So maybe the answer is the intersection of technology and relevance.
Or building products with soul.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or with kimochi.
Kimochi. 大事、kimochi 大事. Okay. Let's discuss panel discussion. Let's start the panel discussion. First, I'd like to introduce Daniel Kotoke-san, your friend, your partner, and Nobuyuki Hayashi-san, and Kazutoshi Otani-san. Please come in.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Bill-san. Hi, Dan-san. Hi, Nobu-san.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. First, Daniel-san, please give us your comments. Daniel, put on your speaker. Mic. Okay. Hi.
Well, that's a broad question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always
yeah. Yeah.
So, what I was wondering is, Bill, were you the high school class of '72? You graduated at the same time as Steve. So
as Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak graduated the year before Jobs and I got in.
So were you invited to be a part of the famous prank for graduation of the middle finger salute? Were you part of that?
No, I was too conservative for that.
Just wondering.
Good question, though.
It was called Swab Job, right?
Yes, Steve Wozniak and Alan Baum. Alan Baum was one of Steve Wozniak's friends. So that was Swab, S-W-A-B, and then Job was Steve Jobs. So.
Right. As a related question, you know, the couple years that I was close with Steve at Reed, I never heard him mention blue boxes at all. Did you have any involvement with the Blue Box project? I'll just add, it took me a long time to figure out when that had happened. That was during your senior year, 1971, right? Early spring of '72.
Probably, yeah.
Did you participate in that at all?
Well, Woz came over and showed me the Esquire article, and this was all very exciting and, you know, interesting as a technical challenge. So we both started trying to design the circuitry, and I was using something called phase locked loops, and Woz was using a crystal and digital techniques, and he finished first, and his was better, so I just dropped my project, you know. And
oh, okay, that's a good story.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Draper tells the story that Woz's version was inferior because it was square waves and not filtered properly.
Woz was really great at doing digital stuff that worked well in an analog world, even though it didn't follow all the analog rules. But it worked, and it worked reliably and better than other stuff. So who cares if it follows the analog rules? If it works better and it's cheaper to build, do it.
Right.
Besides, all those digital edges, the square wave edges, get filtered out by the phone system, which can only go up to 3 kilohertz. So it turns everything into sine waves or approximately, you know, regardless if you're feeding it square waves.
You're right. That's a good point. I never thought of that.
Okay.
You know, I'll just add, I never understood how the blue box the whole scheme worked until I became a telecom engineer myself in the late 90s. And that was just a fascinating thing to learn about. Long after it didn't work anymore. It didn't work by the late 70s, I think.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting side thing. When the long distance control technology was developed, there was no security on it. And when Internet of Things technology, smart home technology, smart doorbells, smart door locks, and so forth are being developed, a lot of it is being developed without much security. And that's bad.
Yeah, that's
okay?
bad.
Eventually, people like Woz figured out how to hack the phone system, and eventually the phone companies decided to add security. So all of you who are consumers of new things like Alexa and Siri and so forth, these smart speakers that are talking to the internet, and you have your smart doorbells and your smart cameras and so forth, you know, you've seen the stories about people who put in a camera in their infant's nursery so the parents can monitor their infants, and then hackers discover them. And there's no security, so the hacker gets in and starts making obscene sounds and obscene words, you know, to the infants, or starts playing back the video of your private home on the internet because there's no security. So all of you should be very afraid, and should all investigate whatever technology you buy to make sure they have adequate security on it.
So in that connection, I think Apple just announced coming out with the VPN product, right?
I haven't seen that, so I'll have to look.
That was part of the announcement a few weeks ago. I think that's a very shrewd idea.
Okay.
Okay. So next, Hayashi-san, please.
Yeah, I really liked your expression, the product for soul. But I've been covering the tech industry for 30 years now, and not many people in the tech industry understands the value of product for soul, or they are more techy and they are more left brain people. And I was wondering if everyone at Apple gets it, or at least in the Macintosh group everyone gets the importance of making product for soul rather than very technical gadgets.
Well, it's easy when you have 10 people working together on something to instill a particular culture.
Yeah.
So when we were the Macintosh group and we had 5, 10, 20 people, it was easy to hire those people who were similar, of like mind, and who could get on board with your vision and your feeling and your goals. And you could hire artists, you could hire engineers, technologists who wanted to create art rather than simple technology. But when you grow to a company of tens of thousands of employees, no, they're not all going to get it.
Yeah.
And when you hire managers from and vice presidents from other companies, they're not going to get it. And when you have to build the second, third, fourth, fifth version of a product line, not everyone's going to get it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, in the time of Macintosh System 7, that we were working on the 7th major version of the operating system, we hired a vice president to run part of engineering, software engineering, from another company. He was very good at managing software and software development. But he would say, we have to develop the next big thing. We can't just do more of the same. We have to do the next big thing, the thing that changes the paradigm, that changes the world. And I would tell him, you don't get it. Nobody knows what the next big thing is. But I can tell you 10 things that if you did these 10 simple things to the Macintosh operating system, the net result would elevate it enough that people would say, whoa, Apple has done the next big thing.
Yeah, that's the right, order of things.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. Well, yesterday, actually, I was on a video, there was an online viewing of the movie General Magic. And have you seen the movie?
I haven't seen the movie, no.
Yeah, but, it's basically all the, original Macintosh team, building General Magic, and, the product failed, but, actually, Tony Fadell, the guy who, made iPod and iPhone, was originally General Magic. Magic, yes. And also Andy Haskell, Andy Rubin, the father of Android, also was working for General Magic. So basically, 98% of the smartphones today came out from the failure of General Magic. That's basic concept of the movie. But back in the mid-90s, there were many big projects like Taligent, Collider, and how do you look back? Do you think all those big dreams and big bangs were worth it, or how do you look back at the mid-90s movement?
Well, let me answer a slightly different question.
Yeah.
In the technology field, you have hundreds or thousands of people around the world doing stuff, trying to make products, having ideas, and trying to bring their ideas to life.
Yeah.
And some of them they all have dreams of some kind. Some of them have developed new technologies or new thoughts or new ideas or new ways of doing things. Some just want to use the technology that's already known to do wonderful new things. Okay. And there are many, many trials that all, if you look back at the history of technology, you find that there were a lot of people trying to do what we called personal digital assistants, little rectangular things that would have contacts and calendars and so forth. And they had many trials. I had one by Casio that worked pretty well. And then there was the Palm Pilot, which was one of the first that was really popular. And there was the Apple Newton that failed, but had wonderful ideas in it, wonderful dreams. General Magic was in a way like that. It wasn't until years later when certain technologies were developed enough, like powerful low-power processors, like cheap high-density RAM, like cheap small batteries and so forth. And in addition, lots of trials at developing software for graphics, for handwriting recognition, for internet and networking software, and many trials and failures in all of these different areas until finally technology was developed enough and some company was successful at integrating them together. And then we remember that as the product that changed the world, when really there were 20 other products that were attempting to change the world. When the Apple I and Apple II were developed, we had multiple other computers, personal computers being developed, and it wasn't clear which would win. The processor technology saw, the Commodore PET, for example. Eventually the Radio Shack TRS-80, okay? Who knew that Apple would be the one with the Apple II that would ultimately become the most successful and would become the icon in this stage in development? It could have been the processor technology saw. It could have been the Commodore PET. But with a combination of marketing and engineering and distribution and all of the pieces, with the right combination, Apple was able to win and become the iconic product of that era. Okay?
And Steve Jobs certainly had influence, in making, in making people realize the value of that.
Yeah, he had a lot of influence on getting people, both in marketing and engineering and development and manufacturing. He had a lot of influence on getting all those people to do the right things.
Okay,
Another thing you don't realize was Apple always had a very strong legal department, very strong, very aggressive legal department. And one never thinks about how much the strength of their legal department and the aggressiveness of their legal department had to do with the ultimate success of Apple. Okay, and yet without it, they would have lost a lot of patent battles, a lot of product battles, and so forth. They would not have been able to succeed as they have. So you never hear about the legal department.
Yeah.
And yet that was one of the many things that Apple did well and was pivotal to their success.
Thanks.
Right.
Maybe it's
So-
time for Otani-san.
Right.
Otani-san, please.
Okay. Yeah, that was very interesting and exciting because you and Dan-san was at the point of revolution. And actually, and especially for Shinhanga, that's interesting because Takagi-san, would you please allow me to share my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. I want to show something.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Please.
Did you? Oh, okay, I tried. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Okay. And can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's a gallery called Shokando in Gion, Kyoto. The master of this gallery once told me that one day Steve and his wife visited his gallery and purchased 1 million yen of art piece. And he wanted to actually hire an artist to decorate his own house in Silicon Valley. But artist refused it because he didn't understand English and cannot speak or cannot communicate with him. But when I heard about that, I was very impressed, and Steve likes the old Japanese art and hanga. So this is very interesting. And I have actually 5 questions for you. Takagi-san, can I take some time to ask him?
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So the first one is using a scale of 1 to 10. How do you evaluate Steve as a friend, leader, business person, and visionary? How do you evaluate him?
Evaluate. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult. Maybe.
No, this is fine. Part of the answer is that his abilities changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone looks at the Steve Jobs who died, but never the Steve Jobs who was born. An infant can do nothing. An infant is helpless.
Yes.
Okay. An adolescent is clueless about life. Okay. You know, when he was in his teens or early 20s with Daniel Kotke, he went off to India in search of enlightenment or some semblance of it, right? So he didn't know what he wanted to do. He didn't have the answers then. So we look at him when he died and say, look how great he was. Was he always like that? Well, no one's always like that. You grow and develop over time. So as a friend, I would say 10. Steve was one of my oldest and best friends ever. Okay, and we loved each other throughout our lives and to the end. As a leader, that changed.
Yes.
You know, he was an indifferent leader at some time, a poor leader at others, a good leader at others. He ended up being an excellent leader in a particular area.
Yeah.
Now, he would not have been a good leader of getting volunteers to work together in a national organization for healthcare relief, or to vaccinate people, or or to do healthcare for the impoverished or something. He would not be a good leader for getting volunteers like that, socially conscious people, to work together in that. But within the narrow area of being a technology leader, where he understood the business, he understood what drives technology and how it works and so forth, he became excellent.
Yeah.
As a business person, that also changed. Although in high school, I always thought, you know, he could grow up to be a good businessman. because he knows how to buy things cheap and sell them for more.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember he
That's
at a
a secret of
garage
business.
at a garage sale or a yard sale, he found a nice receiver, you know, an amplifier, preamplifier, speakers, radio, all built into one that you would plug in and hook up to speakers and a phonograph turntable, and you could the receiver was the heart of a stereo system. And he found one and bought it cheap, and he fixed a little bit that was wrong with it. It was actually the headphone jack. A wire had come loose, and he fixed that. And now he had, you know, he'd bought it for like $10, and now he had something that would have cost like a couple $100s. He somehow was able to end up with a really wonderful TIAC open reel tape deck. This was before cassettes were popular, and certainly before CDs. And he said, how did he get this thing that we would have loved to have had, this beautiful TIAC tape deck? And eventually he had an Otari tape deck. You know, how did he get these? You know, so his ability to negotiate and get things cheap and then sell them for more was part of what made Apple successful. He was able to convince companies to sell a guy in T-shirts and sneakers, or actually sandals, with long hair, parts for his first and then second batch of computers. He was able to convince them that he was legitimate, even though he looked like a hippie. Okay? Yeah. So, you know, that's part of being a good businessman. It's convincing people that you can do business. As a visionary, again, that changed, but the sense of having imagination and wanting to do something more, wanting to do something great, wanting to do something that grabs people's attention and that affects them is a desire he always had. And I think his ability to be a visionary developed again over the years. And it's important to notice it wasn't always him. He did not envision the iPod. He found it. Okay. He did not envision the 3.5-inch micro floppy drive for the Macintosh. His engineers found it. Okay. Like many entrepreneurs, he was the champion of ideas once he had adopted the ideas. But he would fight those ideas until you convinced him. And then he would flip, and he would become such a champion, he would treat it as if he had the idea himself. Because that is the nature of a good entrepreneur. Okay? So oftentimes, he would hire the best people, and eventually his best people would beat him into submission on this idea, and then he would become the champion of it. And because he always ended up, he often became champions of successful ideas, we think he's a visionary. Well, what about the Apple Cube? Apple Cube was a beautiful computer, but it failed. So was he a visionary? Well, yes. Are visionaries always successful? No. You can have a wonderful vision and you can execute beautifully and still succeed, even though you're visionary. So when people say Steve is a visionary, what they really mean is that he was successful. And ultimately, his successes far outweighed his failures.
Yeah, true. Does Daniel have any opposition or addition to this, to Bill?
No, that was very well said, Bill. I would just add that Steve was really outstanding at putting a face to Apple. Kind of his personal marketing style, which I think he got partly from Andy Grove at Intel, or possibly Dave Packard. But anyway, he used that approach to huge success. He kind of became a cult hero. And I can remember Steve telling me way back before Apple started, he said, if I ever become a guru, just shoot me.
I see.
Last time you said, Daniel, you said you are very impressed by TIAC product. Is that right? Daniel-san, please. You met at Reed College. At first, he had a TIAC tape recorder and Bob Dylan and so on. That's right?
Yes, yes. And at the time, I wasn't an audiophile, so I wasn't really curious. But then in retrospect, I thought, well, that's a multi-$1,000 item. Where did you get that?
Yeah, where did he get that?
But the interesting anecdote, which you might know about, Bill, is in the Jobs movie lore, Steve Jobs is always arguing for Bob Dylan, and Steve Wozniak is arguing for the Beatles, right? I think that was a scene in the movie. But what Woz said was, no, Woz was the person who brought Steve Jobs to the record place in Berkeley, where you could buy bootleg copies of the Bob Dylan. Woz was a big fan of Dylan also.
Woz used to take me to the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, SLAC, to the technical library, where the door was not locked, to use a large Xerox machine to make copies of the Bob Dylan songbook. That was Woz, not Jobs.
Actually, Woz brought his book to that place to just go copy it.
Yeah, he took the Bob Dylan songbook with the music, and so you could play the guitar. You needed to know the words and the melody and the chords. So and we were poor because we were just kids. So what do? You find a way to get a free copy. Yeah.
I see.
It is the very place where the Homebrew Computing Club was taking place, right?
I think so.
SLAC?
Yeah, at SLAC. Yeah.
I think they tore that building down a couple years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Could be.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
Otani-san, did you have another slide there?
Yes. My second question is, how do you see the Tim Cook, the current CEO of Apple, and Steve once said that Tim Cook is not a personal product. He is good at maybe the manufacturing or controlling things, but not a person of product. How do you see Tim Cook as a successor to Steve?
Well, I don't know Tim Cook.
Yeah, but not
so I have.
But
so all outside. All I can do is look at Apple, and Apple seems to be doing pretty well.
Yes, definitely.
Now, will it continue to do pretty well? I don't know.
Nobody knows.
In another 5 years, will there be a new visionary product? That's different than everything else. I don't know.
I see.
Tim Cook may have learned from Steve to hire the best people and manage them well so they produce wonderful work. And if he's learned that, then maybe Apple will be in good shape for the next 20 years.
Yeah. And actually, Steve advised him not to copy his style or his way of business. So think or do what you think correct. So I think that's the best advice for him, for Tim Cook.
I think that's good advice for anyone. Be true to yourself.
I see. And what is the most favorite product of Apple right now?
The most favorite to whom?
Most favorite,
to me?
Yes, for you. The Macintosh, or iPad, iPhone, Apple Watch.
Sometimes people say, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? What's your favorite food?
Yeah. It's very difficult.
I don't have favorites, but I can tell you that every day I use, many times, every day I use iPhones and Macintoshes.
I see.
So those are the most useful products.
That's correct. Okay, so my third question is, what would you do if you weren't working for Apple then? So maybe just continue working for NASA or
or Hewlett Packard, or yeah. I was highly employable in my field. So and there are no end of technology companies.
Right.
And indeed, when I left Apple in 1994, I got 4 really good offers from 4 very interesting companies. You know, so yeah, I would just work for another technology company.
I see. Okay. And this is a question for Dan-san also. I saw this picture, and behind Steve, there are several scale models of Japanese anime robots, like Gundam. And so this is this kind of hobby. So Steve were interested in, and he actually built those models by himself. Do you know?
Steve never built models.
I see. But likes this kind of thing, the scale models, or
I've
Japanese
never seen
anime?
that in Steve's life, so I don't know where those came from.
Oh, I see.
But I never saw them in his childhood, in his youth, in his high school days, in the Apple garage, in his bedroom at home, in his home in Palo Alto with his wife and kids. I never saw things like that.
I
so
see.
I don't know where those came from.
Dan-san, how about you?
My guess was that they were gifts from somebody.
I see.
I never saw Steve with models either.
I see. So I just wondered.
He could have been sitting in someone else's office, because that doesn't look to me like Steve's office.
That was a possibility. Yes.
That doesn't look to me like the way Steve would organize his desk.
I see.
You mean it's too neat? It's too neat and orderly?
No, it's too cluttered.
Too cluttered. So his desk was always cleaned up, or
no, just different.
Just different. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that I just curious about this picture. Okay. So
this picture was a big buzz, creating a big buzz. Do you know Gundam is a very big otaku anime stuff?
Oh yes. Yeah.
That's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Making
that's
a big
why,
noise in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I liked the Pacific Rim movie. It was Mecha versus Kaiju.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so what is your current venture, endeavor, or dreams? Please tell us.
Those are all very different areas. My current venture is I am a freelance user experience architect. I do consulting for companies, and I design software that's user-friendly, that their software departments can build.
Yeah.
So, and I'm hoping to retire in a few years and maybe do other things. What is my dream? I have lots of dreams. I'll tell you about a dream I had 4 years ago. I wanted to start my own company to build smart home or home automation products. And I found it very difficult. Well, it was impossible to get funding and very difficult to start a hardware company. Easy to do software. You just sit down at a computer and start writing code. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that programming is easy, but getting started doesn't take much. But to do hardware, you've got to have parts and manufacturing and assembly and engineers and all sorts of stuff. So it's very, very hard to start a hardware product.
Yeah, I know, because recently I interviewed a CEO of iRobot, the Colin Angle, who developed the Roomba. So yeah, that was very interesting story, and my book will be published at the end of this month. And so the hardware company is very difficult, but
yes, very difficult.
Maybe Colin have interest in you, your ability
Yeah.
to make good advice, maybe.
And
Okay.
anybody who wants to buy into my vision of making homes wonderful, technology, infused with technology that makes their home wonderful to live in, you're welcome to come talk to me and give me lots of money.
I see. So yeah, actually, the Colin's next venture is to make a smart home. So maybe it's a good combination, I think. Okay, so yeah, that's my question for now. So just yeah, okay. So
I have a last question. I have a question for Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, so don't you like the idea of a simple, customizable, smart home front end based on HyperCard? Isn't that a great idea?
That's a great idea. Yeah.
HyperCard was a visionary product in many ways, and it's been highly influential. It's a product that inspired much of what the World Wide Web has become. So there are elements of the HyperCard experience that I think would be good as the basis for a home automation or smart home user interface. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the authoring part, is you don't see it anywhere else still. And are you familiar with Project Phoenix? So at the end of the life for HyperCard, there was a team in Apple which was working for a project called Phoenix, which was to make sort of HyperCard stack which is publishable to the web. So they were actually making a web browser plugin. So you can actually, browse through HyperCard stack.
Well, there are companies that have continued the HyperCard legacy, like LiveCode and SuperCard and so forth. But HyperCard, as brilliant as it was at the time, had a number of very serious limitations that make it not appropriate, not powerful and flexible enough for a contemporary product. All these years later. This is like 30 years later, okay? And so there are some ideas and some part of the HyperCard experience that is worth maintaining. But I would use different technology to create contemporary products.
If I may ask questions,
No. Of course, Hayashi-san, yes. Hi, dozo.
Arigatou gozaimasu. So Apple is having very famous for having a very good human interface group, and I think that sort of draw a line between Apple and other computer companies. And were you involved in the HI group very early on, or whose idea was it to start the group?
Well, there wasn't a user interface. We called it human interface at Apple early on. There was, but it all was the same thing: human interface, user interface, computer human interface, human computer user interface. All of those mean the same thing. We didn't have a recognized specialty in this area until after the Macintosh shipped. So all of the stuff that you see, the windows, the icons, and all that kind of stuff was developed by a team of people that Jobs accumulated to create this product. And they drew upon stuff that was done for Lisa. They drew upon stuff that was done at Xerox PARC and so forth. But all of that stuff was done without user interface designers on the team. It wasn't later until Apple realized it needed to continue this ability to infuse this kind of thinking into products that the idea of specialists just to design human interface rather than to program the software that would create the user interface. It wasn't until later that that specialty became acknowledged as something that Apple needed to have more products that used this kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's only one Andy Hertzfeld.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, there's only one
Okay.
Bill Atkinson.
Yeah.
There's only one Susan Kerr.
Yeah.
What if you had 30 products and you wanted that kind of thinking and that kind of expertise? Well,
True.
you find you need some specialists who can specialize in that one area so that the software, the programmers who are not good designers but good at development, you know, or the managers who aren't good at envisioning beauty and elegance and usability, you know, but are able to manage teams of people to produce something, you know, over time you realize you need specialists who can do this part of the overall project. You need designers and programmers and managers and testers and documenters and so forth.
True. And in mid-90s, Don Norman joins Apple, and how do you think it has changed Apple's view at whatever UX user?
Well, over time things get complicated.
Yeah.
Right. So we had the Macintosh group of maybe 5, 10, 15 people. By the time we shipped the Macintosh, we had 150 people in the Macintosh division, right? Daniel started when there were maybe 5 or 10 people. I started when there were 15 people, okay? And by the time we shipped, we had 150 people for manufacturing, distribution, marketing, sales, human resources, and in addition to the product visionaries, if you will, and the core developers. Then Apple developed a human interface group. Eventually, we developed an advanced research group, an advanced products group, where people would research and experiment, and we hired more kind of academic people to think about ideas and so forth. There was one guy, I forget his name, he was kind of brilliant. He did many different kinds of mice. He did mice with 5 buttons, 10 buttons, 2 wheels, 3 wheels, and he'd build these things and write software to do things on the screen. So he was always trying to think, how could we move the idea of the mouse forward? You know, now when you have a mouse product, you go to Logitech, you know, you get 2 main buttons, but you also get like 20 buttons hidden around the sides, right? Okay. So, but he was a forerunner in thinking ahead about these things. And as many of the ideas that were thought of by those people in the advanced research group eventually came into Apple products. Many of them didn't, but many of them did. And they had both hardware and software and user interface research. And I think it was those people who got Don Norman to come in as, I think, an Apple fellow and stuff, because he had distinguished himself in the popular literature as a person who talked about usable design and usability in products and so forth. And he was a cognitive psychologist, so he would think about, how does the brain work? How do people interpret what you see and understand it, and so forth, make sense of things? So he kind of brought that, you know, to the table. How much change did he actually have? How much effect? I don't know. I have no way of really identifying, oh, Apple did this because of Don Norman.
Got it. Thanks.
Bill, did you, I know this is a religious question. Did you have a preference for the mouse button topic, 1 button versus 2 buttons versus 3 buttons? Oh, it's hotly debated in the Lisa group. I think Lisa had 3 buttons, right?
Well, I believe that the mice at Xerox PARC that made the star on the Alto had 3 buttons. And Jobs, I understood, I don't know for sure, but I've heard many times, was a big proponent for 1 button, 1 button simplicity. I always thought that that was too simple and that 2 buttons are good. One for all the normal stuff and the second was for bringing up menus, because you always need menus on things, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'm a big proponent of the 2 buttons, which is kind of how things have come down. Oh, I'll tell you another thing. Here you go. Bill is a visionary designer. Okay, you look at any keyboard. Okay, this is one of Apple's, but on the each side there is a command key, and each side there is an option key.
Yeah.
Okay, and each side there's a shift key. Originally, we had the command and the option key on only one side of the keyboard. I felt that they needed to be on both sides. And I rewired a keyboard physically. I cut it apart and I rewired and put the keys in to make a keyboard with the command and the option keys, or on Mac and on Windows, like the Alt keys and so forth, on a Control and Alt keys on Windows. On both, I made a keyboard with them on both sides, and I wrote a memo with a formal proposal to Macintosh management that we should build keyboards like that, and it was ignored at the time. And 5 years later, like everybody's keyboards, Apple's keyboards, IBM's keyboards, the Windows keyboards, all had the control keys on both sides, the command keys, the alt keys, you know, on both sides of the space bar. You see, so I was ignored first.
And Steve Jobs thought about it for a long time and then decided it was his idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I have a copy somewhere of that original memo where I showed the picture I had created using Macintosh graphics of a keyboard with the command and option keys on both sides of the space bar. You know?
Your talk about mouse kind of reminded me of, you know, Larry Tesler. He has just passed away this February. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you? This is the event for Steve Jobs, but if you could mention some, you know, memory of Larry.
Well, Larry Tesler was a prominent person at Xerox PARC who worked on the user interface of the Star and Alto, you know, operating systems and their graphical user interface. And Apple hired him to work on the Lisa and eventually the Macintosh. And I remember being in discussions with them, not just me, but, you know, the software group with Larry. You know, originally you had the scroll bar on the side of every window, right, to scroll things up and down. And you had this little thing in the middle, we called it the elevator, that you could grab it and scroll up and down. And you had a little button at the top with an arrow, an up arrow, so you could click on it to get things to go up, and a little at the bottom to click on it and have things go down, right? Well, we had to design that, and we had to say, do you have an arrow at the top and an arrow at the bottom? Do you have 2 arrows at the top, one going up and one going down? Do you have 2 arrows on the bottom, one going up and one going down? And when you move this thumb, should the document go down or should it go up? Okay, all of those questions we had to think about. What's the right answer? Okay, and you may recall that originally we said that when the thumb goes down, the document should scroll up because down means I want to see more of what's below.
True.
But you may recall that a few years ago, once we shifted to the iPad where you use your finger to press on a document and move it up to say, I want to see the bottom by dragging up, Apple changed the scroll bars so that when you move up, you know, it scrolls up too. They switched the direction to match what you did with your finger on tablets, you see? So you see the evolution of what do you do on the screen and the interaction that gives the user what they expect. What users expected changed. Originally with the scroll bar, we said that with the scroll bar, it's going to be like a scroll, like a long document. And this is the top, and this is the bottom. And if you move the little elevator to the top, I want to see the first page of the document. And if you move the elevator to the bottom, I want to see the last page of the document. Okay? Well, now it's reversed.
True. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So once Bill Atkinson said to me that actually we invented one user interface. That's why we can change it, because we didn't imitate someone's interface. So if we imitate, we cannot understand what the fundamental thinking of that interface. But we actually make our own interface. So we can change it anytime if we find something new or something better. So I think that in the case of scroll bar, that philosophy is applied, I think.
Who said that?
Bill Atkinson.
Bill Atkinson. Okay.
Yeah, Bill Atkinson.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know that on the Macintosh, at the top of the screen, there is a menu bar, and you have drop-down menus from that. Bill Atkinson invented that.
Oh,
It didn't
The
exist.
program menu.
And I remember looking at his notebooks, and he had pages and pages where he said, and he had sketches. What if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? Until he finally figured out that the menu bar at the top and the drop-down menus was a really great way to give access to hundreds of commands. Cut, copy, paste, italicize, shadow, make it bigger, make it smaller. All of those commands, we could make it easily available in a compact space by using the menu bar and the drop-down menus. He invented that.
Yeah.
Okay.
As I recall, on the Alto, you selected an object, and then the menu dropped down from the object that you had selected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you could imagine was not as good.
No. Now, there was another thing. This is very common in technology, that someone develops something that's interesting, and other people are inspired by it to do something that looks superficially similar, but is actually different in an important way. So, for example, on the Alto and the Star, you could have like multiple windows, and you could have two documents, one on the right and one on the left, and they would join in the middle, okay? Well, you could have two documents on the screen. That was brilliant. That was a huge innovation. Used to be you could only have one document on the screen, but now you could have two or three. But what Apple didn't know initially is that the screen was split like window panes in a window. You couldn't put one document on top or on the bottom of the others. Bill Atkinson wrote the software to make it possible for you to have windows that overlapped each other in layers, and then to bring another window to the front and have windows that moved around behind each other. Bill Atkinson wrote the software that did that. So we took the basic idea of multiple windows on the screen, and instead of having them like a window pane where you have a piece of glass and a piece of glass and they join in one plane, he said, what I really want is to be able to have as many windows as I want and as many layers as I want, okay? So he took the inspiration and did something new and more wonderful with it. So that's part of why we can say we did not steal the Xerox PARC user interface. We were inspired by things that they did, brilliant things that they did. We were inspired, but what we did was our own.
Right.
But since you mentioned pull-down menus, back in the days of System 7, each updates of System 7 had like 100 or 150 new features. But you know, still all the pull-down menus, you know, were as long as, you know, half of the screen. So, you know, that means every new feature addition, you know, you are cutting out some old features to, you know, keep the menu short. And I was wondering, you know, there was no Steve Jobs back then, and who was doing that, you know?
I don't know. There was in System 7, there was a large team of programmers. We had a small human interface group. Sometimes one of us would get assigned to a project to help them with the user interface for it. Sometimes the programmers would listen to us and sometimes ignore us, because in that period of time, the programmers ruled. What the code that the programmer wrote, that's what we would ship. and the programmers would make the ultimate decision whether they believed in what the user interface designers would recommend. And I had some very frustrating times with programmers. I remember one time they were adding a feature to make it possible for applications to talk to each other where you couldn't see it. And they would send messages back and forth and control each other and stuff. And
Apple
this
event.
was very powerful and very useful. Apple events, yes.
Yeah.
And the manager of the user interface group asked me to go and take a look at that project and see if they needed any advice or direction. And I looked at it and I said, there's no security. Any application can control any other application and the user can't stop it. So there's no protection against applications that misbehave or users that have told their application to do nefarious, evil, bad, hacky things to people. And they said, oh, I guess we better put some security in there. So that was a good result where I identified a problem that everyone agreed to.
Okay. Well, I'd like to ask you all. This is the mail from Alan Kay. Alan Kay, 2 years ago, I asked Alan Kay to make a keynote speech at ID 25th and 50th symposium. ID 25th means the Mosaic browser was invented in 1997. So the commercial-based internet began at the time. And 50 means the demo of Douglas Engelbart. It was in 1968. So I asked him, and then his answer is very interesting. Well, worth pondering that 25 years after the Engelbart demo, the Mosaic browser, when it appeared, was so much less, and some of the choices were discussed, and they are still there today. This is because the Mosaic people did not bother to know about Engelbart, nor did they pay attention to Hypergen, nor even to the apps on the machines they used to develop Mosaic. How do you think about this comment of Alan Kay?
It's probably true, but I don't remember clearly enough the Mosaic browser from the standpoint of the things he's talking about. But it's very common for people developing new things to not know all of the things of past history that maybe you would want them to know to make the product that you want. I'm not sure what disastrous choices he's talking about, but I know one that I really hate. When I design applications, I want to be able to control the screen. I want to be able to have multiple windows of sizes I can predict. I want to be able to place things on the screen where I want them and to have them be consistent and well behaved and so forth. But with HTML, that was extremely hard to do.
Yeah.
And with CSS, CSS was a way to help control the layout of things on the screen.
Yeah.
But it was all from the standpoint of people who were making documents, not user interfaces. And now we're using CSS to lay out user interfaces. And I think is disastrous. So that's something I would think is disastrous. This history of the way Windows have misbehaved and not worked right when frames were developed and then iframes and so forth, and then now CSS. From the standpoint of building applications, not documents. Documents is a different story. But for the standpoint of developing applications, it's horrendous.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, neural even to the apps on the machine they use to develop Mosaic, which means next machine. Tim Berners-Lee invented www. Next, yeah. So Alan can say that hypertext like this kind of today's HTML less important than hypercard, neural, next, he said. I think so.
I remember that when Tim Berners-Lee developed what became the World Wide Web, his original goal was for scientists to share documents.
Yeah.
And so HTML is very document oriented, and that's fine. It's great. It was I think a brilliant innovation.
Yeah.
And it worked well for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But as HTML and web technology has developed and people start making applications with it, it's really hard to make a good application. It's really easy to make really terrible ones. You know, anyone who's tried to use Gmail, for example, in a web browser, or any of the web browser based productivity applications, it's really hard to make a good one.
I remember Alan Kay once called HTML DOS of the 90s.
It's a reasonable analogy, because DOS was extremely useful and was pretty good at what it did at the time it was created.
Yeah.
But it, over time it became horribly obsolete.
Right.
And I think the same for HTML.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, HTML is still good as the basis for documents.
Yeah.
I think, having web pages where you can scroll infinitely tall documents, and have videos and sounds and pictures and everything. I think that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But not when you try to make applications with it.
Mm.
So, well, in a sense, he said that we are DOS age of web, internet. Yes. Yeah. Hayasa, how this is about?
I didn't get.
Yeah, Hayasa, please comment. Please.
Those of the 90s?
No. Alan Kay.
Sorry, I didn't.
Alan Kay did not appreciate the Mosaic people.
Yeah. Well, I think, just as I told you before, I was watching at the General Magic movie last night, online. And, General Magic had this very, Daniel just mentioned, you also worked for General Magic for 1 year, but General Magic had this very novel idea of telescript, very intelligent way of communication, and, but the HTML or the web, or the internet invention in the mid-90s was simple sending and receiving of text. HTML is just text, and telescript was much more sophisticated way of communication. So when I saw the web, I also had same impression. It wasn't advancing people, but it's like going back a step backward.
Right. Daniel-san, how's it about Daniel? Daniel-san?
Yes, comment about
it. Yes, Alan Kay's comment.
Oh, I never used the Mosaic browser, so I don't really know.
Yeah. So it means that it's Chrome. Maybe you will use Chrome browser, Firefox.
I was going to say that on the subject of HTML, it took me a while to grasp what the Internet of Things people were talking about when they talk about RESTful interface, REST. You must know that, Bill, right?
Yes.
And as I understand it, it's representational state REST. Anyway, it's basically using the HTML commands to send commands to things, which once I understood it, I thought was a great idea.
Okay. So
now, maybe Mosaic made some bad decisions, but they also made some very good decisions. Mosaic was the first web browser that was popular, that was graphical, and integrated a lot of useful things into it. You could not only do HTML, you could also do FTP, the file transfer protocol. And I think there were other things you could do too, like Gopher and Archie and so forth. Earlier protocols that we no longer use for communication and information sharing. But it was one program that was understandable enough and usable enough by a wide variety of people to do a variety of useful things, all integrated together in one application. So that part was really outstanding and really moved the industry forward. Now, maybe along the way, well, for example, cars, as an example. Some countries drive on the right and some drive on the left. Okay, wouldn't it be nice if everybody drove on one side or the other and everyone agreed? Okay. But for the people who grew up in a country that drives on the right, they go to a country that drives on the left, everything is wrong. Your thinking is wrong and your reflexes are wrong and so forth, and it's terrible. And you know, maybe that's an analogy for Mosaic. They did something that, like a car, was very powerful and empowering, but they also made some decisions that over the long term have been problematic.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to ask you all, well, I'd like to ask all this question. What would Jobs think and do if he is alive now? Okay. So, anyone else? For example, Otani-san.
Yeah. So especially for this pandemic period. Yeah. But actually, Bill-san said the Jobs was not good at voluntary work for the healthcares or something like that. So maybe Jobs wanted to try something, but and maybe if he knows he is not good at that, he will gather people who are good at this kind of thing and do something for the world, I think.
Yeah. See, Hayashi-san, please.
Yeah, actually, I think it was back in 1996. There was a fireside chat at WWDC where Steve Jobs talked, and somebody asked the question, you know, if Steve Jobs, you know, he wasn't, you know, working for computer industry, what would Steve do? And no, maybe it wasn't 96, you know, but anyway, his answer was, you know, he would be doing bio stuff. And you know, maybe, you know, that's right. Yeah, because, you know, as you may all know, you know, bio, well, gosh, it slipped my mind, but, you know, who was the guy who started MIT Media Lab? Nicolas Negroponte once said, Negroponte said, you know, bio is the new digital. And there are so many new, you know, as you know, new bio innovation. And I was really surprised, you know, that even, you know, Steve Jobs was interested in that. But, you know, if Steve Jobs would have seen, you know, this how COVID-19 affected, you know, the whole world, maybe he would be doing, you know, some bio stuff. And I don't know. But I can't imagine, you know, him doing that.
Yeah. So next, Dan-san, Harvard. Danya-san, please.
I think who would have believed that Apple would be making a medical device now? The Apple Watch is a certified medical device.
True. Yeah.
Steve had nothing to do with it. I give Tim Cook huge marks.
Yeah.
So you know, in the late 80s, I was interviewed by the FBI because Steve was considering running for political office, and they had to do research on him and to find out what he was guilty of. And given the the disastrous state of our politics in this country, you'd have to think Steve would consider running for office again if he was healthy.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, would Steve wear a mask? I don't know. I don't know.
That's
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe Steve would have his people develop a mask that everybody in the world wanted to wear.
Yeah.
Very intense. So scientifically, yeah.
Do you remember? There was a story about Steve landing in the hospital bed late in his life, and he's complaining about the iron mask that they probably could design a better one. That was
Okay, everyone, please put your video and the mic to start Q&A and free talking. Everyone, please put on your video and mic, please. Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Hello.
David, please give us some comments.
Oh, it was a fascinating discussion. I mean, very insightful. I was actually watching on the YouTube version from the beginning, and then I logged in here later. But, you know, just interesting insight into Steve and both of you, Bill and Daniel, and your experiences. You know, the one question that I had really is, I know, Takagi-san, you've always mentioned that the Japanese don't really appreciate their own culture.
Yeah.
And the, you know, the long history of Japan with, you know, not only religion in terms of the Zen, but just the design, aesthetic, and the whole thinking. But, you know, Mike Boych, who was one of the early evangelists, he told me that when the Mac was in development, the founder of Sony, Akio Morita-san, sent him a Walkman, and he dared Steve to try to figure out where the motor was. Because, you know, at that time, when the Mac was being developed, Sony was the master of hardware design.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, you know, if either you, Bill, or Daniel, if you had any insight into Steve's thinking of what he thought of Sony, or what he thought of the designs that were coming out of Sony. Because, you know, Apple eventually became the master of software design. But at the time, back in the 70s, Sony was the master of hardware design. And aesthetically, the designers at Sony could out-design anybody in the world. You know, so the question I have is, really, do you have any insight into what Steve's mind was in terms of learning from or figuring out more about Sony and how they did their designs?
Sony
I'm
and Sony
pretty
products.
sure Steve was a huge fan. Sorry, Bill.
No, that's exactly right. Sony and Sony products were very inspirational, and I think that Steve aspired to follow that example, that was one of the examples of a technology company that made things that were small and personal and great and well designed and so forth. Steve would not have tried to create a better motor than Sony, but he would have tried to make products that were as innovative, as well designed, as beautiful as and so forth as Sony products. So I truly believe that, and I know that Sony was one of the inspirational companies that Jobs wanted to emulate. Another one was Bang & Olufsen. In those days, Bang & Olufsen was making beautiful stereo equipment that was out of brushed aluminum, very simple, modern shapes and so forth. And that was another company that was inspirational for Jobs. Okay? And again, he didn't want to make stereos, but he wanted to make things that were simple and beautiful and elegant and high tech. Okay.
And eventually he made the iPod.
Yeah, sure. And the iPad. Yeah.
Or Tony Fadell made the iPod and Steve picked it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Thanks.
Mr. Jameson, Bill Jameson, please give us your comments.
Hello. I'm in Albuquerque, or actually Rio Rancho,
Oh,
New Mexico, fairly close to Bill.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering if you had any insights on the relationship between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs.
I don't have any deep insights or true knowledge. I can only recite my impressions of what I've seen over the years. And I think that their relationship changed over time. I remember initially that Jobs negotiated with with Gates to bring his floating point BASIC to the Apple. That became AppleSoft BASIC. So in that case, Gates was just a contractor providing a product for sale or licensing a product for sale to Apple. And I think that was the beginning of their relationship. Okay, I think at one point they were competitors, they were frenemies, and so forth. But I think my impression is that at the end, that they liked and respected each other.
Thank you.
Well, 日本人の人、日本語でもいいですから、どうぞ登場して質問してください。どうぞ。
私はあまりわかりませんけど、
Okay.
日本語でもいいです。
Yeah.
Takaki-san will translate.
Yeah, maybe. I can translate. How about?
じゃあ質問していいですか。
どうぞどうぞ。はい。
アップル、ジョブズがソニーに日本語ですみません。ソニーに憧れてたということで、多分いろんな形でソニーを真似したと思うんですけど、アメリカの企業でやっぱ憧れて真似してた会社というのはどういう会社があるんでしょうか。
難しいな。日本語ってことですか。
アメリカの中の企業でって言うんですね。
His question is, Steve, we all know Steve Jobs, like Sony, and he's following, the move Sony made. But are there any American company which he liked and which he was following?
Well, he was inspired by different aspects of different things. For example, Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, he was inspired to some extent by his management style, by his success as a CEO, and by the success of Intel and so forth. Even though Jobs never wanted to make, integrated circuits, as a result or as the end product, he respected that. I can't think offhand of what other American companies were inspirational to him, but I'm sure there were others.
How about Cuisinart for design? Cuisinart. Home appliance and kitchen appliance.
That seems like a good guess, but I don't have any actual knowledge about about how he felt about Cuisinart.
I see. I just heard that. Yeah.
I can tell you that the Cuisinart came up in our early design discussions for the Macintosh as an example of a well-designed home appliance, which is what we were trying to do with the Macintosh. Now, so the early Macintosh ideas were very much the product of Jeff Raskin, not Steve Jobs.
Right.
So the Cuisinart model might have come more from Jeff Raskin.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Koike-san, please introduce your company's products and
Thank you very much. 日本語でいいですか。
OK。
今日創出の時におられたビル・フィルナンデスさんにお聞きしたいんですが、それからアップルがジョブズが辞めて潰れそうになったじゃないですか。で、それから復活し してきて、シンクディファレントっていうキャンペーンをやりました。で、それが今、アップルがすごい大成功している大きな要因になっていると思うんですけれども、それは創設時におられたビルさんから、そのシンクディファレントっていうそのキャンペーン5年やられた。それはどういうふうに見られているかちょっとお聞きしたいなと思いまして。はい。
How do you think about think different, Bill?
About think different?
Yes, think different campaign.
Well, think different is a marketing campaign. And in marketing, you're always trying to capture people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And if you can capture people's attention in a way that's different than everyone else, then that's good marketing, as long as they like that difference, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You capture their attention. And for a marketing campaign to be good, it's like telling a good lie.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to tell a good lie, you have to put as much truth in it as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So to position Apple as a company that thinks differently than others, and you should think differently too,
mm-hmm.
and we have a different way of looking at things, and you can benefit by looking at things differently,
mm-hmm.
is like telling a good lie. There's a lot of truth in it, right?
Okay. How about Daniel-san? Daniel-san, hi. Daniel, please.
I was gonna add that there was a very long, detailed article recently by the original writer of the Think Different ad campaign, working with Lee Clow. I read that article. It was quite fascinating. Of course, Steve Jobs thought it was stupid at first, but then he thought about it, and then he came back and said, "Oh, this is great." That was funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think his question was more about how it affected people within Apple to change the corporate culture, etc.
I wasn't at Apple at that time, so I have no idea how it affected Apple internally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 小池さん、小池さんのね、ところのプロダクツって、デンタルプロダクツ、すごく新しいじゃないですか。
はい。
ちょっと簡単に紹介してあげてください。簡単に。
難しいですね、簡単に。
iPad で、あれですよね。iPad で、お医者さんがすべての歯についてのアドバイスを患者さんにできるってやつですよね。
そうですね。
うん。なので僕、英語できないので、林さんかなんか翻訳したい。
So he's making a dental solution. Koike-san is making some dental solution, on iPad. He just, Takaki-san just wanted to mention that. So.
Yeah. And そのデンタルソリューションはアメリカにもないんですよね。
Yes.
And it's unique to Japan. I mean, unique to his company.
Because every teeth, they have every teeth information on the iPad.
Yeah. Just scan your teeth with your camera.
これできないね。ああ、ミラーね。
プラネットっていう会社は、日本のアップルの代理店でありながらデベロッパーなんですよね。ベリーユニークな会社で、すごく日本だけじゃなくて、僕も知らなかったんですけどね、歯の一本一本のきちんとしたデータベースを持って、しかも iPad でそれを患者にインフォコンセントできるっていうサービスっていうのは、Apple もものすごく評価してるんですよね。
ありがとうございます。
Okay, dental. So you can maybe later search for dental Excel. Yeah.
難しいね。
Sorry, I wasn't following this.
Okay. And
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Anyway, and a very unique product for people of teeth, your teeth, the teeth database they have, and this is not U.S. Dentists of U.S. don't have this kind of
solution.
Yeah. そうそうもうちょっとアピールしてもよかったんですけど、みたいな。
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. So, do you have any questions? Right? So, today, very, very interesting and very exciting conversation we can do. And so it's well, it's 16 minutes over. Okay. So very thank you very much for Fred Johnson and the panelists. Thank you very much all. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
I hope you all had fun.
Thank you for sharing your insight.
Yeah.
はい。サンキュー。はい。サンキューだけでいいです。はい、いいですね。はい、どうも。はい。はい。はい。
Hi.
はい。